Hey, welcome to the Sam Powell Podcast. How are you all? Few listeners, but cherished listeners. I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right today. I'm exhausted, but I'm telling myself consistently good over occasionally great. So despite fatigue, I will be doing this podcast episode, and I'm excited by this. So for today's podcast, are we treating kids like kids for too long? Should we be sending kids to war? No, not literally. But I do think we are treating kids far too much like children for far too long. And I've been thinking about this this week as I've just started reading about the life of King Henry V of England, and I'm finding his story remarkably inspiring, and it's making me question whether we're treating children like they're children for far too long, particularly in the West. Now, the story of Henry V, by the age of 14, he was already leading thousands of men into battle. He'd spent more than 4 years already accustomed to the workings of royal court, the government, internal affairs, and then also, not internal affairs, international affairs. He spoke 3 languages, French, Latin, and Common English. He played the harp, and he was also an avid reader of literature. So this was all achieved by the shy age of 15. He was being heavily exposed to just life by the age of 10 by his father, and it's been a story that's been it's captivated me, and I don't think it's unique that it's just the story of Henry V. I mean, yeah, he's probably one of the most distinguished, remarkable warrior kings England has ever had. But I don't think it's unique that his life, that he was exposed to, say, work or just being an adult so young. And so my question again is are we treating children like they're children for far too long? If we treat people like children, they continue to act like children. And this is true of people of any age. One of my other favorite books, No Rules Rules, by Reed Hastings, the founder and I believe still CEO of Netflix, although that might not be accurate, but I do know he was the founder. Part of the culture of which they constructed Netflix around was treating adults like adults. They would then act like adults. So that meant that they weren't responsible for, say, doing timesheets, or they weren't responsible for, say, putting in leave requests, or they weren't responsible for putting in business expenses for every little thing. And every employee's allowed to work as many hours a week they want, or as little hours a week they want, as long as the outcome was delivered. And they found that if they treated people like adults, that they were able to be autonomous, independent humans, able to exercise their own responsibility, their own freedom. They actually did that. They didn't take any more leave than any other individuals do. They didn't work that much more or work that much less, but they allowed for individuals who did want to work a little bit less to work a little bit less, and those that wanted to work more to work more. They provided that autonomy. And I think it's the same, or the inverse occurs, that when you put all of these barriers around individuals, or you put these guardrails on there, you treat people like children with these ridiculous rules, you end up getting children, or you create an environment in which adults can act like children. They will then inherently act like children. And so when I've been thinking about this this idea of, should we be growing up earlier? Should we be treated as adults earlier? I was looking back and thinking about my childhood, my adolescence. My fondest memories weren't of toys, or they weren't of like video games, they weren't of like movies, they weren't of like, I'm not sure, like play school things, like they weren't of that. Like my fondest memories as a child were when I was working with my dad on the farm, and we were spending time with either one of my parents, like in their office or on an ad shoot, but it was working, whether it was like, digging fucking fence holes, or like cleaning up alpaca shit, or like harvesting potatoes, or like sitting behind a computer, like doing like admin jobs, or like working. It was strangely enough, like those are the memories that actually like stand out to me the most. And I think there's like two parts. One was that I was with my parents, like I was receiving, and it didn't probably matter like what I was doing with them, but the fact that I was, I think, being like treated like as an equal, or being that respected, and being considered being involved in something that was like what I could understand, or like even if I was understanding only at a subconscious level, I could understand that it was important, it had meaning, had purpose, and being involved in that is something that, as I said, subconsciously or not at the time, like I seem to be like aware of that. I seem to understand the value in like what I was like doing. And I mean, gosh, I don't really remember complaining either when I did have to do like work, or like, collecting like firewood, like for the fireplace. Like I loved doing that, like filling up a little wheelbarrow, like bringing it in, or even like, setting up a fire, or collecting like all of the like the dead brush to turn into like a bonfire, or, just stuff like that. Like, those are the memories that like come to me much, much quicker than like, I don't know, some skateboard I got, or some like toy. I don't even remember like most of the toys I got. The other memories that like really stand out for me when I was a child, when I was young, was when I would just be like sitting with my dad at the dining table after like things had been cleared, and I would be like talking about the world with him. We'd be talking about politics, we'd be talking about religion, we'd be talking about quantum physics, like art and history, and all of which was happening before the age of 10, 12 years old. And, it didn't matter that I maybe didn't like, say, fully grasp it, like I'll understand it, but I distinctly remember just enjoying like listening to someone teach me, or like share things with me, or like ask me like questions like about something that was beyond my years, and just having a very like just open discussion, a real discussion about just like worldly things. And so that was going on at 10, 12 years old, maybe like a little bit younger as well, like a little bit older as well. I mean, it's something I still do with my dad to this day, but it was happening from a very young age. And so if that was happening, 10, 12, maybe that's why I could appreciate or like understand where King Henry V, when he wasn't a king, when he was just 10 years old, and his father is positioning him in court, positioning him in the country, like positioning like around him to start to like learn and be involved in the goings on of like this adult world. And and I think about like how I was like I was really eager to participate in this work or in these discussions, or like interact with adults well before I'd hit puberty. And I don't think that's like unique to me. I think kids are like interested in like what adults do. They're interested in like copying. They're interested in like mimicking. Like they have such a curious, like absorbent mind. Like, I mean, I think they have the capacity to have the interest and to handle it, and they're probably more capable to like deal with, say, the the suffering or the tension or the strain of it than I think we like give them credit for, or like we coddle people to now. And I think it's uniquely important to even start this, or to treat kids like valued adults prior to them hitting puberty, because by the time like I reached puberty, my attention was going elsewhere. I was becoming more interested in drinking, parties, and girls, and I was still very focused on my academics at the time. I was still focused on like doing sport. I was still like focused on like me and like the things I was responsible for. But I think I was 100% committed to the former. I was more committed to the drinking, the parties, the girls, like the socializing, like being a fucking dickhead, at like 13, 15, 16, like, and like at that point, like I probably needed the discipline and the encouragement from my parents to focus more on work, or to focus more on like family, and to be given the opportunities to mature, rather than just being told like I don't know, being coddled at school, or being told like, just like have fun and like be a kid. Like if I was encouraged to actually like participate like in their work, or to like, mentor from them, or just like participate in some sense, I think I would have like gravitated. And I suspect like most kids would probably gravitate to that, and it would actually protect them from all like the nonsense, the bullshit of like parties and girls and drinking. And it's not that I think you shouldn't do that at that age. I think it's more about just like something to draw my head out of the gutter of all that nonsense, because I think it's actually very important for adolescents to be exposed to those things in adolescence. I think it's the perfect age to be making those mistakes. Like you're sort of young enough not to take it too far, and we've all met those kids who weren't exposed to them. So when they did reach the age of 18, 25, and they go wild, they start to act like a child, like much further, much later in life than everyone else, because they didn't get to make those mistakes. They didn't get to socialize like we all did, but it shouldn't be the pinnacle. It shouldn't be the priority. That shouldn't be like the focus. And I think that's the consequence of when you're being treated too much like a child by your parents in school, and then you're exposed to this more adult thing, funnily enough, of being able to like socialize and drink, and girls in this like aspect, boys, if you were a girl. And that's the thing you want to do. That's the thing you want to gravitate to. You want to like go outside. You want to like explore and experience these like parts of the adult world. And I mean, gosh, everyone's doing that. So it's suggestive to me that, we're just treating kids far too much like kids. We're not giving them the sort of like respect they deserve. And like going back to like King Henry the Fifth, like, so he's already leading thousands of men by the age of like 14. He's gone to battle. His mentors are 25 years old. I'm 28. Like his mentors are 25 years old. Another one is like 35 years old. And these individuals are considered to be like acclaimed individuals in their craft. They're seen as experts. And like how is that achieved? Like how I don't think it's by like accident. I don't think it's like, because people were living shorter like lives, and so they were only living to like, an average of like 36, that 35 was an old man. Like I think that's a bullshit conclusion to come to. I think it's because they were being treated as adults much earlier. They were then going about the world as adults much earlier, and that's why they were able to like experience and achieve so much. But instead, it seems like now children are just being children for longer and longer, and that's getting worse like the more time goes on. Kids seem to be like living at home for longer and longer. People are not taught how society or like money works until they teach themselves, and that might be in their like mid to like late 20s. Some people don't know how to even cook, for Christ's sake. Like, I mean, if you can't even like feed yourself like properly, yet people are addicted to Netflix, they're addicted to gaming, they're like addicted to their phone, and they're addicted to those fucking like tumbler bottles or like whatever it is, like as if that's like something like meaningful. I mean, shit, I've had like bullshit purchases and thought, what the fuck, why did I buy this? Like, and I mean, not that this is about like consumerism, but more that like that's the thing that kids or adolescents are like accustomed to. Like that's like the craft they're learning, how to Snapchat, how to Instagram, how to navigate this like social media world. And then the education they're being given now seems to be like as well, like just like it's not actually pressing on them enough. It's not challenging enough, or it's not worldly enough. It just seems to be getting like easier, or that it's becoming like I don't know, too PC for like real history to be taught, or like it's like where did like learning like literature, history, like philosophy like come from a classroom? Like where did that go? And it's like it's no wonder then that, you know, a kid goes through all of their high school, you know, most of them, they've been wearing a uniform the entire time. They're not learning anything meaningful about the world or what has been, or like who they are. They're getting no opportunity to actually like define themselves, to like define their own being, and to do work with purpose, or to live up to their own potential. And it's no wonder that then by the time they turn 18 and they've finished school, and there's these soft, weak-minded individuals with no sense of purpose, nothing admirable to believe in, and so they get thrown out of school, and most of them are going into like a university, and they're just going into this open world, which they're no longer wearing a uniform, and they've got no sense of identity, and they've got nothing to believe in worthwhile, nothing honorable. And so in that sort of that existential crisis of wondering like, who am I? Like what am I? And then they're being provided these ideologies that are then shoved in their fucking face. Like when I first went to school, to university, it was all about Marxism and communism, and like the Marxists would like come into lecture halls at the start, they'd be preaching their shit, and then like they'd be shouting out when like the next protest was going to be, and then protests would be happening, and then there'd be like refugee stuff going on, and then there'd be like something else, and then it'd be like a stop all thing or some Greens thing. And then in my second degree later, then it was all about like the trans movement and LGBT stuff. And when you're so weakly minded, you've got no sense of who you are, you latch on to this ideology that's like presented in front of you because it gives you a sense of identity. It's like you're being taught like, okay, this is what you should believe in, this is what you should stand for, this is who you are if you join us. And you can then, and it's powerful, right? Like you're now a part of this group that is like standing up to like the system, or they're standing up to this like other thing. And there is a sense of identity in that, but it is, it's almost like this quasi, like, religion that people are now adopting. They're sort of subscribing to, and unfortunately, it's kind of like this demented like religion. It's like a body, but an arm or a leg of it's like broken, and so it doesn't actually, I think, supply the person with the sense of purpose, meaning, identity that they're seeking for and need. And maybe because these ideologies are now participating in the adult world and they've been children for so long, this is another avenue for them to be adults. And part of the reason why I think these kids are so easy to latch onto the first ideology that is presented to them is because they've never had to take responsibility for their own lives. They've never had to, say, confront tension or the suffering or the dry responsibility, the dry work that is related to doing work, whether it be on the farm or at an office or just working for your parents. And they're so addicted to the short-term gratification of social media, drinking, socializing, you name it, that they're too anxious to then face the world on their own. And so that ideology offers some support. That group identity offers some support to that, and it's not their fault necessarily. I think the system is just providing much more much more lax or much more comfortable grounds for people to just grow up without a backbone, essentially. And so it's of course, we treat them like children for far too long. And so of course they get spat out the other side of childhood, still a child, but in an adult's body. So where does that leave us? Look, I'm not a child psychologist. I don't know if there's an innate capacity, truly I don't know if there's an innate capacity in children for when they can start be treated more like an adult. I suspect it's also the case that it's down to the individual as well. But why is it the case that having read a lot of history, understanding that cross-culturally children were bred by peasant families, by middle class families, because they were seen as being able hands to support the family. And from the ages of 6, 8, 9, 10, they had the responsibility of doing work in a household. Now I don't know how many kids I knew growing up that had no responsibilities. They didn't have to do chores, they didn't have to learn proper manners, they didn't have to work a job when they turned 14. They've been allowed to live at home until they're 30 or older. It was not the experience I had, and I'm not trying to hold the experience I had on a pedestal, but I was given the opportunity to work and do activities work activities on a farm from the age of 5. I'm so thankful for the very adult conversations that I was having with my dad from a very similar age and onwards. I was, I don't even say forced, but I was strongly encouraged by my parents to start working from the age of I think it was 12 or 13. 13 it was. I don't know, it was before legally you're allowed to work in Australia, but I did get a job before that. And then, from the age of 14 and 9 months when you are legally allowed to work, I was working as well, and I worked right up until my very final year of high school, in which I had the discussion with my parents about stopping work in that final year just so I could dedicate it purely to my studies. And as soon as I finished high school, I started working again. And then after I started like working for a little bit, I then moved out of home as well, like several months just after I finished high school. And that was because it was encouraged by my parents, but also they said that if you don't start paying board, if you don't start paying rent for where you live, then, you know, you can, yeah, I mean, you've just got it. I don't even know if it was an ultimatum. It was just that if you're going to continue living here, you've got to start paying rent and board. And so my thinking was that, shit, if I'm going to pay rent or board, I may as well do it for my own place rather than like, you know, at home with my mum. And so, so yeah, and shit, that was, you know, 10 years ago now, just shy of like 10 years ago. And I haven't moved back home except for a very short stint after I like came back from the other side of the world, but very temporarily. And as I said, I'm not putting that on a pedestal. It was more just to give perspective of my perspective and the context of which like I'm coming from. But I just meet so many individuals who have such lacking capacity to be an adult, to like confront the tensions and suffering of the world, to take responsibility for themselves. And I just believe they've just been treated like children for far too long in their life cycle, provided way too much coddling, way too much comfort, provided, you know, there's been no strictness to the responsibilities they should have undertaken. So yeah, where does that leave it? I mean, it really makes me like wonder, like, what am I going to do with my kids when I have them, like one day? It makes me think I'm definitely going to be engaging with them as adults, like speaking to them like as adults as early as possible, even if it's just reading to them books that aren't children's books. Like I used to love my dad reading like Moby Dick to me when I think I was 8 at the time, and you know, him reading me like books on World War II or like the First World War or like quantum physics. I didn't need to like understand it completely, but just that exposure to like the more adult world, that adult thinking, like I thoroughly appreciated. And I know that's something I'm gonna not even aspire to, that's what I'm gonna do. And I think the other thing that, and something I've really picked up from this book on Henry V and from another book written by Robert Greene called Mastery, and it's about the value of an apprenticeship, and he uses the example of a blacksmith's like apprentice, you know, someone that you would go work with from the age of like, you know, 12, like 13, and you do this 10-year apprenticeship with them, and so by the time you got to, you know, in your early 20s, you are now a master like blacksmith. And I think about like how fucking useless so much of like what you learn in high school, even what you learn in university at times. I mean, one of my degrees was phenomenal. The other was so useless. And the arts degree, believe it or not, was the one that was phenomenal and has given me so much more use than the commerce degree I did. That commerce degree was so useless, and what a waste of money. That'll be a whole nother podcast episode on like the university system, education system, because I do enjoy talking about that. But it's made me think about how I would enjoy to encourage my children to interact with me like at work, like to be able to like bring them in and have them like, even if it's just watching, telling them like, you're not to be like involved here, you're not here to like speak, but just to be like watching. And then as they got older, like to be able to like ask them like questions or have them like doing things that were like meaningful, because I think it would just make them so much more comfortable, confident and capable in the workplace, in life, as they got older. So yeah, that's what I've been thinking about, considering like lately, like, you know, do we treat children far too young? I mean, I made that joke at the start, you know, should we be sending kids to war? No, obviously not. But kids below the age of 18 in medieval like England and medieval parts of like Europe were being like drafted or conscripted into the army well below the age of 18. I mean, there were kids like falsifying their records so that they could go into the First World War. And I'm not encouraging that, but I'm more just noting the capacity for kids below the age of 18, below adulthood, to act more like adults. And the expectations we've had on them at different like times in their life, and the evolution of our culture, of our society, seems to be directing us more towards just delaying childhood even further and further back. And I'm sure that this may even be part of the multivariate problem of like why people are getting married so much later in life. They're having children so much like later in life. People are single for such longer periods of time as well. And just not having meaningful relationships. And so I suspect that this may be one of the variables within that, obviously, a multivariate problem. Anyway, I'm going to leave this as a bit of a shorter podcast, but thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Sam Powell Podcast, number 3. Thank you for all of those that might be tuning in and listening in these like early stages, but I'll catch you on the next one.